But look at the cards that are allowed to be used. The older person's bus pass, the disabled person's bus pass, the Oyster 60 Plus card, the Freedom Pass, the National Entitlement card, the 60 and over Welsh concessionary travel card. All of these for older people. It does rather beg the question, is part of this not to do with the fact that if you are under the age of 25, you are far more likely to be voting Labour in the next coming elections?
Nonsense. I think the studies that were done showed that actually younger people were more likely to have, I mean, the figure's 98% overall. So, I mean, most people have one of these forms of ID. But I believe the study showed that younger people were more likely, even more likely, to have one of the various forms of ID than older people. So the point you're making, I think, is categorically not fair or accurate.
But just to reiterate this point, there are young people who have student identification that they've achieved through their local college or their university. There are young people who have their rail card where they've had to show proof of identification. These people have had to do more. They've had to do more than they have to do online through the voter authority system.
Yeah, I think it is pretty clear there's nothing sinister going on.
But the interesting thing is, Mr. Philp, because you know how the House of Commons work, the Prime Minister didn't set out that he had an interest. He tried to brush it away by saying he'd made a ministerial declaration. The right way to do it is to tell the House, and I look back, in your maiden speech, you declared to the House an interest in a housing company you owned, and then in November 2018, you declared to the House that your wife had an interest in a subject you were talking about. So if you felt obliged yourself, rightly, properly, to declare an interest to the House verbally when you were in a debate, why is it one rule for you and another rule for the Prime Minister who didn't declare that interest in front of the liaison committee in detail? He didn't mention his wife or the business. You mentioned your wife and the particular business you and then she were involved in. Why is it a different rule for him?
Well, I'm impressed by the thoroughness of your research. I think each Member of Parliament has to obviously...
Right, can't I?
Well, I mean, I don't remember 2018, but I'm sure you are if you've looked into it. So he did flag to the committee there'd been a declaration, made the declaration as a minister in the proper way.
That's not a public declaration in the same way as an MP has to make those public declarations. They're available online.
The minister's declaration of interest does get published when the advisor on ethics decides it's has gone through them all. So that will happen. It will get published.
We keep being told everything gets published, but it doesn't. Registers of interest are only useful if they are publicly available.
Yeah, and the ministerial register will get published. There's obviously been a change of ethics advisor relatively recently. Those declarations will get published. Rishi is obviously cooperating with the Standards Commissioner to clear up any remaining questions. But I think a common sense look at this indicates pretty clearly there is nothing sinister going on.
But he does find himself under some form of investigation now. Just what? It was in October that he promised that this would be an administration of integrity minister.
And I think it has been. I mean, no one seriously doubts Rishi Sunak's honesty and integrity. When issues arose, for example, with Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs, he acted quickly and decisively to deal with that. I don't think anyone seriously thinks there's anything sinister here. I mean, the announcement he was making or discussing at the committee was putting more money into childcare, to give free childcare for people up to 4 years old and to get more people to train for childcare, something I think all of us can get behind.
November 2018, Hansard, you declared your wife's interest. Why did you do that and not the Prime Minister?
Well, I must have considered at the time that it was relevant. Each MP makes their own decision. He did refer in answer to that question at the committee that he had made the relevant declaration as a minister, and obviously he then wrote to the committee, I think a few days later or a short while later, on the 4th of April, clarifying it further. Clearly he's going to cooperate fully with the Standards Commissioner in looking at this. But I think it is pretty clear.
It just feels to me, though, Mr. Philp, when you give that answer, there is something to look at here, because you judged it appropriate in November 2018 to tell the House about the detail of your wife's interest, and the Prime Minister chose not to mention his wife's interest. And the question is, why didn't he play by the rules you played by?
People have been attacked using these terrible knives, which, as you say, have no practical use at all. They're either double-edged machetes or zombie knives with sort of shapes and protrusions, which means when somebody gets stabbed with them, they can cause very, very serious internal injuries. They're used to intimidate people in street muggings when criminals trying to take a Rolex watch or a mobile phone, and they're used in the context of inter-gang fights as well. So we think there's no reasonable use for these weapons. That's why we're taking steps today to ban them.
I suppose the question has to be, why has it taken this government 13 years to ban big knives?
Before, and you may be aware that the Labour Party has published research that shows that every Home Secretary since 2010, bar Grant Shapps, who was there for a very brief time, has made the same announcement. It was Theresa May in 2016, Amber Rudd in 2017, Sajid Javid in 2018, and Priti Patel in 2021. And now I'm speaking to you as Crime and Policing Minister in 2023. We've had these promises before. Nothing has happened. Why on earth should my listeners believe a single word of this?
Well, that's not true. I mean, things have happened. We've been progressively tightening the law over the last few years. We've got amongst the already, before even these changes, we've got amongst the toughest knife crime laws anywhere in the world. What these announcements are doing are taking it even further. There are some loopholes still. For example,
still
some
out
of the
there, Minister. These zombie knives, as I believe they're called, are still out there, and we were promised they would be outlawed a number of years ago.
That's right. Well, the laws that were passed 2 or 3 years ago outlawed some zombie knives, but not all of them.
Why are we demanding people show photo ID at polling stations when historically this country has never had a problem with voter impersonation?
Well, of course, one of the issues with voter impersonation is by definition, you don't know when it's happening. And when you can turn up to a polling station, as you currently can, and just say, my name is John Smith and I live at number 10 Acacia Avenue, that's it. You just get given the polling card.
So presumably you've got lots of evidence.
And you vote. Well, as I just said, it's the kind of thing where, by definition, it doesn't get detected. Of course, there are plenty of times when ID is required for simple things, including collecting a parcel or indeed voting in a Labour Party parliamentary selection meeting. A number of other European countries have this requirement.
You don't need to have photo ID to be a candidate in these elections, but you need photo ID to vote in them.
24,000 police officers taken off the streets? I mean, it's no surprise, is it, that knife crime went on the rise? Where did the police officers go?
Well, that was two points to make there. First of all, the reason that police officer numbers fell in the years immediately after 2010, and there was spending constraints in other public services as well, is because the outgoing Labour government left the country essentially bankrupt, and George Osborne had to take difficult decisions.
Your government's decision to make those cuts to the police force.
Let me finish. And the outgoing
government, under the previous government, there was a record number of police officers.
For the previous Labour government, with all due respect to Ed, bankrupt the country. The outgoing Labour Chief Secretary left a message on his desk in the Treasury saying there's no money left.
We lost more than 20,000 police officers and knife crime soared.
But if we look at the Electoral Commission data on all of this from 2022, there were 7 allegations of personation at polling stations, and in not one of them was there anywhere close to evidence for them to proceed with it. There haven't even been prosecutions, let alone convictions. So again, I ask why. On the one hand, you have the rights of 2 million people without photo ID potentially becoming disenfranchised, and you've got 7 allegations of personation in 2022, none of which resulted in a conviction.
Well, I think in order to have absolute confidence in the ballot, I think saying you need some form of ID in order to vote in person on the day is a reasonable thing to request. There are 20 forms of ID that are acceptable, and we found that I think 98% of people have one of those forms of ID, and for the 2% that don't, there is a free form of election ID which they can apply for, and I believe well over 1,000 people a day have been applying for this in recent months,
including me this morning. And I was rather surprised to find that through this process, all you need to do is insert your personal details, pop in your national insurance number, and upload a photo. I mean, if that system is not capable of being, if fraud is not capable of being perpetrated through that system, then I don't know what is.